Hi, my name is Ken Lasseson. This is a walkthrough of a new feature I added so I can show it as well as give you some background information. The This feature was added as a result of doing a timeline analysis of a child with autism. So the mother had been regularly taking microbiome samples. I went and inspected that over time to see what changed. And during that process, I noticed that there were certain predicted symptoms predicted by the artificial intelligence on this site, which kept reoccurring and reoccurring and reoccurring. And my thought was, wait a minute, we can use this to reduce the noise of the microbiome. Often in the microbiome, you will see one bacteria suddenly appear and then disappear. So the purpose is to try to quiet down these arbitrary random shifts, which may be because you had pizza last night or some other thing, or you're suffering from a cold, some other things that will cause noise in your microbiome results. Now, here we have the person, and you can see they have lots of samples. I happen to have lots of samples too. It is good, and in fact, this whole feature is designed for people who have many samples or decided to start doing regular samples to see what you will get from it. So what we do is we go up here and click compare samples to each other. We now see everybody. I don't want the mother included in comparison. And now we have this new choice, probable symptom clusters. If you take a look at the prior page, you will see I have like probable symptoms here, which attempts to predict what the symptoms are. So if I click that, you can see what the symptoms are. You see how many patterns, how many different bacteria in the symptoms, how many matches, and a predictor estimate of how reliable it is. Usually about 0.6 reliability starts becoming real fuzzy. Once you get up to 0.65 or and above, usually things are pretty good for having a high reliability in predictions. Okay, so that's where we get these symptoms, and now what we are doing here is we are looking at all of them from all of these samples at one time, and what we do is we see what is habitually predicted. In this case, autism is predicted 100% of the time. Every single sample, that was prediction. Here's another thing which was predicted 73% of the time. Another one, 63% of the time. So this one probably came on because some bacteria which sort of wanders in and out. Up here, the bacterial combination is so strong it keeps showing up and showing up and showing up. We have up here a threshold, and I'll come back to show you what it does. This is artificial intelligence engine, and usually they have a tuning parameters. The threshold here is the tuning parameter. You raise it, and the number of items showing up here will go down. You lower it, the number of items here will go up. It's basically a way of separating the amount of noise in the data. So we have there, and we now have all of the bacteria listed, and we actually see there are 33 here. Now, my usual suggestion is take a look at the highest impact, and anything above that, which is 30, would be 16 and a half, you want to include. Anything below, you probably want to exclude because they are likely far minor players. In this case, the 31 means that this particular characteristic shows up in, since there were 11 samples, was a significant predictor for each one of those three, and every single time we had a matchup. 21 means that again we have 11 samples. That means probably two-thirds of the two of the three items here we have a matchup. Another two of the three, number two of the three. Again, what these are the bacteria which really match up often with the predicted symptoms. We just go here and we go and we click, takes us back to the page, and now if you scroll down you will find somewhere on the list a golden set of buttons. The the information is assigned to whichever taxa is the best match for the general pattern. So it could be any one of them. I suggest you go and you delete all handpicked taxa before you do it so that you can find the one it has picked. If you click here and view the taxa, you go and you can see the actual value. You can see your value, min, 25%. So what we see here is delta protofactor. You have a low value. Next one, you have a high value, 7323. You have a low value, but that's sort of interesting. It may be that it matches the pattern in some way, but how I'm not quite sure at the moment without doing some digging. Here we have a very high pattern, more than in the top 6%. Low pattern, just one is high pattern. Wafia 5022 is high pattern. Sublinguum is a low pattern. This one is a high pattern. Doria is a low pattern. Another Doria is a low pattern. So you can infer whether or not you're dealing with high or low shifts from that particular view of it. Now we can go over and do handpicked taxa. You will see it's automatically marked for the one which we are working with. And now you can go and get suggestions. Let's suppose we want to restrict the suggestions to, let's say, herbs, spices, flavonoids, prebiotic and probiotics. So we're going to restrict it just for illustration purposes. I'm going to have the number being 30. I'm going to toss a couple of things in just to increase the amount of information it uses. So I'm using things by inference. So if it impacts a child of this particular genus, we assume it will impact the genus, which is very common sense. Now, not always true, but it is a good approximation. We click show suggestions, and now we go down and we see what the particular items are which you should be taking, quercetin, sugar beets, etc. Items which you should be decreasing, and then we have selection of named commercial products which have a desired impact. The mood probiotics is sort of interesting one that comes up here for autism, but pure osmosis probiotic powder, which can be purchased in bulk, is also the same amount of impact. You have a mixed impact, which some of it will help, some will hurt. We don't know what the net effect is going to be, positive or negative. They are mixed impact. Usually they are don't use unless there is a good reason to use it. And then we have negative impact, things which will make things worse. For example, let's suppose you take a look here and we have Trilac, which often will be prescribed by physicians because it's well marketed. The Vest Advantage, Haute Culturelle, all online, all of which will often be prescribed by a physician simply because they know the name. Oh, it's a good probiotic. Other patients have used it. It may be good for those patients. It is likely a bad choice for yourself. And then we get down to the ones which we don't know anything about. If you're taking them, no problems with keep taking them. And then we have flavonoids 1, and it's interesting. We have two different types of cinnamon suggested there. We have iron and we have thalamin. So that gives you a pretty good overall summary. Okay, now I'm going to go back to the suggestions and I'm going to flip over back to the menu, compare samples to each other, and I'm going to again do the same thing I did before. And what I'm going to do this time is play with the tuning number. I'm going to increase it to 0.7, and we are far more selective. We have just one diagnosis, and you can see that this one diagnosis occurred every single time for this person. We have 11 samples, and these 11 things were exactly dead on. We have a bunch of things which were on 10 times, 9 times, 8 times, and we found a grand total of 17. Before we had 33, so we cut the number of bacteria in half. We could go and pick these and see what they would suggest, just dealing with just finer subset of things. And I'll leave that as exercise for a reader. The fault was 0.6. I'm going to change down to 0.5. And oh boy, we get a big long list. And down below, we find we're up to 55 bacteria. So we have a lot more bacteria. And the more bacteria you have, the harder it is to have confidence you have just the ones you really should be modifying. If I go up to 0.55 and repeat it, we have a much shorter list. So again, you are free to play around with the numbers. The numbers here will impact how many bacteria is going to be listed, and then you have to figure out which bacteria you want to include. Ultra conservative, say, okay, some of the other things may be factors, but let's just keep to the one thing. Then you have the bacteria which keeps placing this particular child into the predicted autism camp. Makes it much easier to say, okay, what should be changing? Here's a list of bacteria you really want to be changing, and now you just have to figure out. Some cases like here, we have the family, the class, and the order all being included, and the genus. So we have, in some ways, we have sort of repetition. It's just this whole area we are off on. Again, you have the ability to sort. And you can see we have about half of them all belonging to the same general order of bacteria, and then we have individuals elsewhere. Okay, so that is basically the long and the short of it. Gives you ability to filter out what bacteria are the real long-term players in your microbiome challenges. Okay, that's it.